In this video, you might learn more about Lee Harvey Oswald than you really want to know. If you believe there was a conspiracy, you probably think Oswald was either a hero or an innocent victim who was framed for the president's murder. If you're a denier of the conspiracy, you probably think Oswald was a dirty little communist who got up one morning and decided to carry this attack out by himself. I'd like to show you a few things about Oswald and what was really driving him back then, as well as the facts about what he did and didn't do prior to the assassination. By the time we're finished, I think you might agree that the real Oswald was a much different person than was portrayed by either the government or its critics. Of course, to understand Oswald, we have to understand his politics. And these days, pretty much everyone agrees that he was a real communist. After all, he said he was a communist, he told his wife he was a communist, and he told pretty much anyone who would listen that he was a communist. There was another guy who for over 9 years also told his family and all his friends that he was a communist. His name was Herbert Philbrick, and from the age of 13 to 15, Lee Harvey Oswald became obsessed with this man and his story. Philbrick was an undercover agent for the FBI who infiltrated a communist group in Boston. During that time, he convinced even his family and friends that he was a bona fide commie. But in 1952, he testified against his former comrades before the House Committee on Un-American Activities and helped to convict several of them. Philbrick quickly became an American hero. He wrote a best-selling book about his battle with communism, which was followed by a movie and then a popular television series. All three of them came out in 1953.
This is the story, the fantastically true story of Herbert A. Philbrick, who for 9 frightening years did lead 3 lives. Average citizen, high-level member of the Communist Party, and counter-spy for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. What's the matter, comrade? Trouble? Got a cigarette here? Yeah.
His favorite TV program was a saga of political intrigue and espionage.
Past year.
I led 3 lives. He became really engrossed in that particular television show.
But this was no James Bond fantasy. It was supposedly based on Philbrick's real-life experience, and every episode had to be personally approved by J. Edgar Hoover. The program was nominated for an Emmy in its first year of production. It was also in 1953 that the 13-year-old Oswald first became obsessed with that program, shortly after which he went to school one day and told his teacher that he refused to salute the American flag, obviously trying to make himself look like a communist, just like Philbrick did. Philbrick was one of the most fanatical anti-communists who ever lived, and he became a spokesman for the FBI's campaign against communism. To see the kind of thing that Oswald was being exposed to, look at this scene from the movie he made for the FBI entitled, "What is Communism?"
As I travel around, I still have people say, well, why are you so hard on communists? They're just another political party like any other, and a poor minority at that, and so misunderstood. Well, we don't want them misunderstood, and that's why we're making this film. And that's why I say they are lying, dirty, shrewd, godless, murderous, determined.
As Philbrick's many fans knew, he started his career joining the Young Communist League in Boston. In 1956, Oswald wrote a letter to the Young Socialist League, claiming he was interested in joining them, once again mimicking Philbrick. Of course, Oswald didn't join any socialist or communist groups back then. He was much more interested in ultra-patriotic military organizations, like the Civil Air Patrol and the United States Marine Corps. In fact, he begged his mother to lie about his age so that he could get into the Marine Corps early. Isn't it strange that the Warren Commission never wondered why a dedicated young communist would be so driven to join this organization with an agenda to thwart communism and kill communists? After finishing boot camp, Oswald was stationed at the high-security air base in Atsugi, Japan, but the Marines were having a problem there. They suspected that some of the local prostitutes were passing on information to the communists that they acquired from their Marine customers. The evidence is quite conclusive that Oswald's first intelligence mission was to investigate these prostitutes for naval intelligence.
One of the things that I found out from questioning Oswald's associates in the Marine Corps was that he wasn't living the life of an ordinary Marine. He was living what you might call a secret life. He was moving to the type of bars and nightclubs which weren't for the purpose of socializing, but were for the purpose of making contacts.
One day, a fellow Marine noticed Oswald heading off limits with a Eurasian woman he assumed was a prostitute.
There's a small business section across one bridge that was called Skivvy Bridge. We were allowed as Americans to go into that sector of the residential portion of Iwakuni. The other sector was considered to be communist, Japanese communists, and it was an off-limits area that we were not allowed to go in as Americans. The first time I saw Oswald with the Rondai, she was a beautiful white Russian. He was walking with her. They were going across the bridge into the section that was off-limits to us.
It was during this same time that Oswald acquired a venereal disease. Jay Epstein learned that this prostitute, whom Oswald was seeing regularly, typically charged up to $100 a night for her services. Oswald's entire monthly salary at the time was less than $85. But Oswald told fellow Marine David McNell that this was an American intelligence mission, and that they gave him money to pay for a sexual relationship with that prostitute. So at this point in his life, Oswald has talked like a communist, but what he really does is join ultra-patriotic American military organizations and work on behalf of U.S. intelligence against communism. The next major step in his life, long before leaving the Marine Corps, is to make plans to go to Russia.
During the end of his duty in California, Oswald carefully prepared his next move. First, he applied to a college in Switzerland. Then he applied for an early discharge. The day after it was approved, he applied for a passport. He secretly planned to go to Russia.
Oswald didn't defect to the Soviet Union on a sudden impulse. We know that. This was well planned, and the question is, could Oswald have planned this alone, or did he have help?
Oswald's route to Moscow was complicated. He journeyed from New Orleans to Europe, where he moved quickly from France to England, then to Finland. Helsinki was one of the few cities in the world where an American could get a visa to Russia on short notice. From there, Oswald boarded a train for Moscow. Where did he get the money for his extensive travels? He later claimed he had saved over $1,000 while in the Marines, but records show he had only $200 in his bank account.
Obviously, Oswald lied about having that much money. So what was he doing there? Well, the first thing he did after finally being permitted to stay in Russia was apply to the Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow. But this university wasn't just teaching the 3 R's. It was indoctrinating potential terrorists from third world countries and training them to go back to their homelands and start revolutions. Of course, it was of enormous interest to the CIA and U.S. military intelligence. By the way, in case you've always wondered why Oswald first applied to a school in Switzerland when he was so obsessed with Russia, consider that coming fresh out of the Marine Corps, he needed a way to establish a cover as a legitimate seeker of knowledge rather than an agent for the United States. The materials that the Schweitzer College mailed back to him gave him something he could present to at least give that appearance. In Part 2, we'll be looking at the real reason Oswald attempted suicide and the KGB's discovery that he was not a very good communist. As it turned out, he was also not a very good spy, but he found a way to exploit his communist legend that was far more devastating, or at least it was to the enemies of J. Edgar Hoover. Thanks for listening. My name is Bob Harris.